Wizard Kings. This is the Columbia title for fantasy block wargaming. The game came out a decade ago or so, but now it is at its second edition, which is the one that I'm holding here. I like fantasy, I like block wargaming, so I knew it would only be a matter of time before I finally got to play this game, which I finally did. What also grabbed my attention, what made me curious about this game is what it says here, up to 7 can play. Ooh, that's exciting. Does it mean that this is a game that I can just bring to a game night, to a regular, normal game night, and play it with 3-4 people that may be interested in playing the game? Also, with the fantasy theme, it is always easier to convince people to play a game. Or is it going to be a game that, yes, can be played by many people, by up to 7, but it is a game of such complexity and length that actually you can play it only at wargaming events? But I digress. Back to the previous point. Wizard Kings, a game that I played in 2-player mode and that I brought to a game night because I wanted to play with a larger number of players. That I did. And today I'm going to tell a little bit about how the game works, and then I will share with you my experience of playing the game in different types of settings. The game includes 7 armies represented by wooden blocks of different colors. You have the undead, the Amazons, so trying to show you some of the illustrations. The dwarves, what's a fantasy world without dwarves? Nothing. The elves, you have a Wicana there. Oh, come on. Yeah, we got the Wicana, which is the wizard of the elves. Barbarians, the feudals, which are basically just medieval folks. Medieval folks. I find them a little boring because I'm playing a fantasy game. I want elves, and I want dwarves, and I want orcs. Here we are, the orcs. So you do have a variety of different types of units there. I have to say that the original game comes with 8 blocks per army. Then you can expand the game, and as you can see, I've done that. I've definitely acquired more blocks because I like the idea of having more options and being able to combine different types of blocks to experiment with different types of armies. But even if you just play the base game, you have 8 blocks per side, yes, but you have 7 armies, so that is still a good amount of units that you can use. Then you have dice, counters to indicate the gold that is produced by the cities on the map, cards to represent the spells that the characters can use, a terrain chart which does not come with the game. I downloaded and printed it, but it is very useful, especially if you're using the game, because otherwise the terrain effects are described within the book. They're a little bit buried in the rulebook, but in any case, the rulebook is not long, that's for sure. It is only 8 pages. It is pretty simple. 8 pages and not with a million rules. It is really very accessible. I would say that this is one of the most linear and one of the most accessible games that I played from Columbia. In terms of complexity, it kind of reminds me of Quebec 1759. Then the original game, the base game, comes with 4 maps. And again, you can expand it by adding more maps, which I did. Yeah, I have many more maps. In fact, I don't even remember which are the 4 original ones and which ones come with an expansion, but I'll just show you some of these maps to give you a sense. Scenarios can be played on a variable number of maps. You can have very small scenarios, just played on a single map. A standard 2-player game, not too long, not too short, usually is played on 2 maps. As you can see, these maps can be connected in many different ways. It's really easy to attach them to one another to create very different types of terrains. And if you can already attach 2 maps in 4 different ways, then imagine when you start using more maps, combining more maps, creating maps with 3 of these small maps, with all 4, and then you can add more maps. And at that point, when you have so much flexibility, so much versatility in the terrain that you can create, and you can add new units, you know that this game has a huge potential in terms of replay. Each player chooses one of the available armies, or sometimes, depending on the scenario, a player may have more than 1 army. Then for each army, a player receives a certain amount of gold points, usually that is 50, and those are spent to build the initial army of the player. Blocks have a number printed at the bottom left corner, and that is the cost of each of the pips of the unit. This unit, for example, can go up to 4 pips, that is 4 points of strength. Each such point costs a gold point, so I need to spend 4 gold to add that unit to the game at full strength. So at the beginning you can spam your points in pretty much any way you want. You can bring in a lot of units at a reduced level of strength. The side with the name of the unit indicates 1 pip, or you can bring in less units but at full strength, because of course bringing in units at full strength would be more expensive. This unit costs 8 to be added to the game at full strength. This is a particularly powerful unit. It goes up to 3 pips, but each pip costs 4, pretty expensive. So you can mix and match units and different levels of strength, and then you just add those to your map. Usually each player starts by controlling a map, and maps have cities, and usually the only requirement is that there is at least a unit in each city on the map that the player controls, and later in the game the player will try to protect, defend that map, and to take control of cities belonging to other players on the other players' maps. Turn structure is very simple. First, all players move any and all of their units, and the turn order is decided randomly each turn. After movement is completed, in all hexes that contain units of more than 1 player, you will have a battle, and you may have battles involving 2 armies or more armies with larger games. After all battles have been resolved, you have the build phase, during which the cities will produce the amount of gold printed on each city, and units will be able to use that gold. Units must be in the city where the gold is being used to take advantage of that gold, of those gold points, and you can refit your units again by spending the necessary amount that is printed on each counter, the cost per pip, and you need to spend that amount of gold to improve your units or to build new units. But again, you need to be in the city, and sometimes you need to accumulate gold for several turns before you can really significantly improve one of your units, especially units that cost more than a gold per pip. Anyways, back to the movement phase. During the movement phase, units move a number of hexes, which is up to the movement factor printed at the bottom right corner of each unit. Then each unit also has a symbol in the movement box, and that indicates the type of movement that that unit can use. This unit, for example, can fly, which is pretty neat because that unit can ignore terrain restrictions, but not hex stacking limits when it lands. And then there are many types of limitations and restrictions given by terrain, and at the same time many types of units that can overcome some of those restrictions. For example, units cannot pass mountain X sites if they're not using a road unless they have a mountain symbol there, and in that case they can move into a mountain axis without stopping and without using a road. Also, land units have to stop when they enter wood hexes or when they cross wood hex sites unless they have a wood symbol. In that case, they can keep moving. Roads can be used by units to receive certain benefits. There are just so many different ways in which units and terrain can interact, and that of course really brings up the unique capabilities of the units. Combat is resolved in your traditional Columbia block war game system. That is, all units attack individually. The order of the attacks is indicated by the letters on the units. All the A's attack before all the B's, and then all the B's before all the C's. The A's of the defender attack before those of the attacker, and so on and so forth with the B's and the C's. So combat is never simultaneous, effects are applied immediately. A unit rolls a number of dice equal to its present strength, as indicated by the number of pips. And the number by the initiative letter is the number to hit. For each number that the unit rolls, which is equal to or lower than that number to hit, then the unit inflicts a hit on the opponent. Unless specific game effects are being used, the units of the opponent cannot be targeted individually. It is always the strongest, the healthiest unit of the opponent that takes the hit. Suppose that a hit is inflicted on the orcs, then it has to be this unit here that takes it because it is the only one that has 4 points of strength. But in case of a tie, then the owning player can choose which one is the unit that is reduced. But combat in this game has an original element, which is spells. Some units are indicated by an A+. These are wizards, and wizards can cast spells, usually during combat. Each army has a list of spells that the wizards of that army can cast, and spells are of 3 levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. This is the number of health points or strength points that the wizard must pay in order to cast that spell. So, to cast a spell of level 3, you must inflict 3 hits on the wizard. And as you can see, that is pretty expensive. In fact, a wizard can even die by casting a spell, which is allowed. It is expensive, it is dangerous, but sometimes it is what you need to do. And so yeah, these wizards are just spilling their own blood. They really believe in their mission. So once you decide to use a wizard that way, you cast the spell. The spell is cast at the beginning of combat. A+ means that the wizard may activate before the other A units do. And to resolve a spell, you simply read the text of the spell that you cast and you resolve it. For example, if you choose this spell here, then you cast 2d6 and you inflict a hit on each 3 or less that you roll, and you can target individual units of the opponent. As a 2-player game, let's say that this is when you see how the standard identity of the game is. You see what the game is about, which is a game where the Columbia block wargame system has really been stripped down to the bone. It is an extremely economic, extremely lean version of the Columbia block wargame system. At the same time, there are enough elements and ideas in Chrome overall that a sense of theme is created around that core of rule. I do still have the sense that I am moving fantasy armies that are acting and interacting in specific ways rather than just moving blocks with numbers and letters printed on them. I think that there is theme here, definitely. But another thing that I like is the flexibility that this game has. If you invested a bit of money in getting some extra blocks and some extra maps, then you have the sense that here you have a system more than just a game, because you can play completely different games from game to game. You can choose different combinations of Amazons or orcs or elves. You can create so many different types of landscape with the maps that you get, and even within the same game you can try different strategies in different sections of the game. You can go initially for, I don't know, smaller number of stronger units, and then maybe a higher number of weaker units. Just there's so much flexibility here in the ways in which you can organize and reorganize and acquire your units and create your army. That definitely this makes the experience extremely enjoyable to play. It really makes you feel in control of what happens, and just I have the sense that this game gives you more freedom than many other Columbia block war games. But what I like more than everything is the fact that I can bring this game to a game night, and this is a war game that works in the context of a normal game night. Wizard Kings is simple enough that you can teach it to non-war gamers in more or less the same amount of time that it would take you to teach a semi-advanced or advanced Euro. It is definitely a game that is not past the capability of the of your average gamer. And it is also a game that really works well with more than 2 players, because well, everybody is experimenting with different types of armies. The map is larger and there is enough room to explore and maneuver. But then there's just an interesting interaction among the players, because yes, players will sometimes side together against a player, then the allegiance will switch. Players will strike a deal that then will be broken by somebody stabbing somebody else in the back. It is really a game that emphasizes interaction among players and not just interaction among blocks on the board, which really is what is great at game night. It's a game that does give you the sense that you're sharing a group experience with other players. So this is great. I'm getting all this and I'm playing a war game, best of all worlds. So bottom line, to me this is a really good game. As a 2-player game, it's just as enjoyable and good as some of the best games in the Columbia block war game family. But the advantage is that it has so much flexibility. I can play it in so many different ways with different types of players and in a variety of settings. Because of this flexibility, I think that this game, if you're willing to invest a little bit of extra money, is better value for your money than, let's say, the average Columbia block war game or many other games out there.